Am I the a-hole for no longer making toys and furniture for my former SIL after her new husband called them an embarrassment and me cheap for not paying for stuff? My brother died before his firstborn child was born. Because of this, I've had an above-average involvement in my nephew's life. One thing I've always done is build him toys and furniture. It was a way of providing without the awkwardness of handing over cash. Also, between my late brother's cash and life insurance via work, a trust was set up for my nephew for £500,000. He wasn't actually married to my SIL. Now via the lab at work, I've made him a lot of wooden or 3D printed toys, but also some simple handmade electronic toys. My sister-in-law was always grateful for these, and my nephew, by all accounts, loves his custom toys. Fast forward 3 years and my former sister-in-law have gotten married. I was attending my nephew's 3rd birthday and I turned up the night before to assemble his present. It was a small climbing frame/swing set I had watched better carpenters than me in the lab make. The new husband was a little standoffish, but come the day of the party he was telling anyone who listened that I didn't pay or make the present I had luckiest at work do it for free. This culminated in him calling all my presents an embarrassment, and given my fancy job I could afford to splash some cash. I confronted him and my former SIL, and she basically confirmed that whilst the presents were appreciated, she honestly expected more direct support from me after my brother's death. My mother stepped in and reminded her my brother paid for this house and they regularly take cash out of the trust, approximately £10,000 a year. We walked out without hearing any worthwhile response, but I continued to see my nephew without incident. 6 to 7 months go by and I'm visiting only to be told my former SIL was pregnant with twins, and she was wondering if I could make some duplicates of items I made for my nephew as they needed 2 sets. I scoffed, said she had balls asking me to make stuff after she was so ungrateful and I owe her unborn children very little. She got upset and explained her prior statements about my handmade gifts and said she felt they were the kind of little things someone did as a favor. Not what a family provides. That's why she's asking me now as a friend to do her a favor and manufacture duplicates. I said no, again, and her husband shouted through that it didn't matter, they would just use the trust to provide for kids like it's supposed to. I retorted that it was for my nephew and good luck accessing it for that because the trust requires my signature to pay out. I wasn't even home before he was calling me to apologies, clearly unaware I held the reins to my late brother's money. The apology was insincere and I asked to speak to my former SIL, where I confirmed again I wouldn't be manufacturing her anything. I'll still be an uncle to my nephew and be impartial when it comes to her accessing my nephew's trust, but her husband has burned a lot my goodwill with this. Am I the a-hole for not doing her a favor after all that? She has a financial responsibility for her son too. So what's left for her to pay? Food, clothing, utilities, miscellaneous. The house is paid for and childcare is paid or nearly paid off. Seems like they're in the UK, so healthcare and 15 hours of childcare are taken care of already. Seems to me she thinks she should have hardly any financial responsibility for the child she brought into the world or her household. I think they're using the son's money as general household money, and this new husband thought he found a golden goose. He's awfully concerned with the value of things and thought the trust was a piggy bank for their lifestyle. Yeah, I agree that they are a-holes. Unfortunately, since SIL's new marriage seems to be bringing out an ugly side of her personality, or worse, there's a more harmful reason for an abrupt change in behavior after several years of being perfectly normal and nice to Op's family. Op is going to have to make decisions in the best interest of his nephew in the face of the boy's mother and new stepdad being complete jerks. Subsidized childcare for X number of hours does not mean you get those hours at any daycare or preschool of your choice in the country. Those first 5 years are so critical to a child's success later in life. If there is a possibility to provide the boy with a better than average experience/education and Op believes that's what his brother would have wanted for his son, then does he deny the child the funds if mom can't/won't pay for her half? Unfortunately, this will be true for so many things until his nephew is old enough to gain control of his trust. For example, if his nephew shows aptitude in an expensive sport, it's a safe bet based on current behavior that mom and stepdad won't pay for their half of equipment, uniforms, etc. So does Op just tell his nephew, sorry, bud, but here's a ball you can kick around that empty lot over there, or does he sign off on the funds even if the situation isn't fair? This change in dynamics since the new marriage will make Op's job so much harder and unpleasant, but his brother is relying on him to be the bigger man and do what's best for the child. Fortunately, from everything his Op has shared with us so far, it sounds like he has that strength of character in spades. To be clear, none of the above is to suggest that Op should hand over whatever amount of money SIL requests willy-nilly. There definitely should be regular audits of how those funds are spent to ensure they are being used in the best interest of his nephew. NTA in the slightest. I think the new husband probably felt a bit emasculated by what you provided. I wouldn't even allow them to withdraw a modest amount every year, unless to prove the money was for your nephew's needs. You owe her nothing monetary, especially as she was never married to your brother, so she should be more than grateful for the gifts. Also, how lovely and sentimental. I would much prefer that to shop purchase toys. Shows a lot of love and thought. The new husband needs to reevaluate his thinking and attitude. He is living in your brother's house after all. Once your nephew is 18, I would consider if they should even be living in that house. Can you tell I've been jilted and treated in the same way? I have no sympathy for them in this situation. How ungrateful they are. So sorry for your loss. This is the last thing you need to be dealing with. They surely should understand that you want to spend and enjoy time with your nephew. She owns the house, but I'm considering tightening up the purse strings on my nephew's money. The situation was between all the sources of the cash and the lack of a will. We were in a position to make a judgment call on what my brother would have wanted her to have. All this aside, she was with him for 8 or so years and we never had any issues. My nephew needed a home, so we called whatever she needed for a house or portion of everything. We have been understanding and signed off on withdrawals in the years after his death without too much inquiry as to where it's going. With this new husband and the kids, it might be time to enforce the circumstances the insurance companies paid out on. Namely, it's my nephew's money and only to be paid out in his benefit until it's released entirely to him at 25. True. Happened to my cousin. His father died when he was a toddler, grossly medical malpractice. His paternal grandparents sued on behalf of him. They settled out of court for a little less than $2 million. Grandparents made the mistake of not really paying attention to the trust and what his mother wanted. Whenever she would ask for money, they would give it to her, no questions asked. My cousin's mom also had 5 other kids and she didn't have steady employment. So, chances are, she was using that money to support her entire household. By the time my cousin was 10 years old, there was less than $2,000 left. He didn't know about the trust until he was 19 years old. Our granddad unintentionally revealed it to him in a conversation. By then, he was a broke college student, who was busting his ass with 2 part-time jobs in order to survive. Plus, he was also giving his mom money to help her out. From what I remember and from what my cousin told me, she was spending money on lavish gifts and not on necessities. His mother. How do you say? She's Bugito. She suffered from wanting to be the big fish in a small pond. I say this because of her attitude and demeanor. She lived in an apartment in one of Brooklyn's worst housing projects, but she wanted to let others know that she had it like that. So, she bought designer, name brand clothes for herself and the kids. She always had her hair and nails done. Took them to Disney World a few times and took them to Six Flags many times. Put her older kids, my cousin and his older siblings have different fathers, through private Catholic school. That seems to be a big thing for a lot of New York City residents. Had birthday parties in nightclubs and catering halls. I remember she had an Audi and then a Benz. When I was a kid, this was back in the 90s and 80s. So, that money dried up quickly within 5 years. My cousin was 2 years old when his dad died. He was 5 years old when the trust became accessible to his grandparents. Money was gone by the time he was 11. His grandfather died when he was 15. Grandma died at 18. And from the way it looked, his mom was planning on keeping the news of his trust fund away from him. From what I remember and from what my cousin told me, she was spending money on lavish gifts and not on necessities. His mother. How do you say? She's Bugito. She suffered from wanting to be the big fish in a small pond. I say this because of her attitude and demeanor. I would agree that enforcing the insurance terms more harshly is smart. When it comes to money, you really can't predict how people will behave and change even if you think you know them really well. Her new husband sounds like the type who takes a mile when given an inch and will probably think his kids deserve that money just because they have the same mom as your nephew. Be wary that they may also use that money of the children not entitled to it. You sound like you are being very smart about this and acting in the best interest of your nephew. I wish I had someone like you in my corner when growing up. I would also keep a close eye on how the new husband treats your nephew from now on. He sounds the type to play favorites. Edit. Also, if possible, don't tell them how much is in there. I am assuming the money is gaining interest? Stepdad sounds greedy, and how much in there is none of his business, and I am not sure your SIL will keep the amount a secret from him.